keynote speaker. We have an amazing keynote speaker with us today, Reverend William Chaney, and DEI Chair Matthew has brought him in today. So Matthew, I don't know if you want to introduce our keynote.
Yes, I'll go ahead and introduce Reverend Chaney. So, Reverend William Chaney, I've gotten the pleasure to know him over the past several years. Always enjoy always hearing what he has to say, and I just thought he'd be a really great keynote speaker for this convention. That's really all I have. But I'll go ahead and turn it over to William for our keynote address.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be with you. I'm honored to be asked to join you today, speaking about one of my favorite subjects. I see there are a few people online that don't have their screens on. When I get to the points of asking questions for thumbs up or thumbs down, I'd appreciate having some input from folk. Today, I've been asked to talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity. And guess what? If you haven't heard about it, this is the hottest topic in the land. I do training and development. I do a lot of coaching with corporations. And my business last year, when COVID-19 hit, it went down. It just totaled out. People didn't want to spend money anymore. But right after the death of George Floyd, all of a sudden my business started picking up. It was happening in small businesses, large businesses, and government institutions, asking the question, what do we need to do to be a more diverse and inclusive and organization that's about equity? And so when Matthew asked me today to be with you all, I have been training on this now with different organizations. My goal today is not to give you everything that's out there, but hopefully give you some keys that will help this organization to move forward. That's where I need y'all with me? Good. So I used to speak in debate class, and in debate, I got up to about 200 words a minute. And they told me, it was unbelievable. But at the same time, nobody could understand me. So if I begin going too fast, just still slow down and I'll get the message, okay? So as the first slide comes up, I want to ask you a big question. Do you realize that this organization right here, the people who are on this line right now can grasp onto a big idea that can change the world? You have the skills, the abilities, and the knowledge already, but there's one big idea that can help you all change the world. Why do I say that you all can do it? Because I read about you all have leadership capabilities. You care about people. And when those two things come together, what happens? Big ideas become action. They begin to change the world. And when you look at this, it's true no matter who you're looking at. Think about W.B. Du Bois. His whole goal was, how do I empower people of color all over the world? Got his PhD, then he started the NAACP, then he started a school, a university, then he went over to Ghana and built houses and schools, because that's what was his purpose, his plan. Steve Jobs, same thing, had a purpose, had a plan, one big idea. The difference is he got kicked out of his company so he could learn compassion for people. But when he came back to Apple, all of a sudden it blew up because he had that missing ingredient. And so you may ask, what is the big idea that can change the world? And you're going to find out in a few minutes. I'm not going to tell you just yet. But you all on this line are the ones who can change the world. But we have to also deal with the concept of diversity and inclusion. We must ask a few questions, and those questions demand us to look at things a little bit differently and honestly. And one of those questions is, why is it so hard for America to embrace a multi-ethnic society? We want that. We've said that since our beginning, but at the same time, when we hear about people saying we want to be multi-ethnic, we also hear people say, I don't want that. It's a conflict. It gets uncomfortable. Well, part of the reason is because every organization that's built on a firm foundation will last for a long time. And the firm foundation that America was built on was never valuing everybody from the beginning. If you want to just check out what I'm saying, we first start off with the Native Americans. There was never a time when they were fully embraced as a part of who America could be. When they were debating about the Constitution, You had the northern states that were saying we haven't had slavery, but we don't want to overpower the southern states, and the southern states saying we can count everybody. And those two things were in conflict. Yet at the same time, there was this thought that all could come to a place where we call America and be together. The challenge is that foundation has been very solid, very strong, and continued until this day. And it's just now beginning to break down. Because America was founded on this, we look at homogeneous organizations were born to satisfy the need of building up people. And when we see that, now we see those organizations changing. And you have to understand, change is extremely hard. Change is exactly the one thing that we don't like. When our organizations are going well, when our families are going well, when our jobs are going well, when we're doing well in school, when they say we have to change, it messes us all up. But really, change is the law of life. And all of this that we look to, it comes from the opportunity for us to look to the future. Although change is difficult, it is extremely necessary. And so I'll just talk about a little bit of my experience. I enjoyed when I was in college. I know you all may not have heard of the show, but I did. It was called General Hospital. And General Hospital, I scheduled my classes around General Hospital because I never wanted to miss an episode. I know you all are way more mature than I was, but back then I thought that was the ultimate show. But guess what? One day, one of my teachers, they said, we're going to change our class. It's going to be at 3 o'clock every afternoon now. That just totally messed me up. It was difficult to make that change. But in order to get the grade, I had to make the change. What do you think I did? I made the change. And yet I realized from there on that every change I was going to make was going to be difficult because we choose between our values and then we look at the opportunity that really makes us feel good. And that is sometimes very challenging. But we still have to ask that question. Why is there racism still in America? Why is it such a challenge? Because there are people who are changing. There are people who are embracing multi-ethnicity. There are people who are saying we want to be more inclusive, but yet there still seems to be some challenge. And this is where we have to kind of move forward and understand that every generation has been a part of this change. See, the silent generation, our older generation, segregation and the separate living and education and everything of all the races, that was their norm. They didn't have to think about it. That was what was expected. But then baby boomers began to start accepting it as a part in their workplace, in their schools. And it became a moderate change because although they changed because of laws, the hearts were not yet switched and changed. But then the millennials came along. Millennials shook up the entire world because until the millennials came along, baby boomers were ruling. And what has happened now is it's driving those who are in corporate America crazy. Now that Gen X is coming into the workplace along with the millennials, they're taking over the world and changing all the rules because deep inside the DNA of a Gen Z, they have no concept of this separate but equal, but everything is diverse. It's a part of their DNA. Here's what CNN Money says. The millennial and Gen Z generations are the most diverse in history. 56% of the 87 million millennials in the country are white, as compared to 72% of the 76 members of the baby boomer generation. Look at that. If we can stay on that last slide for just a second. If we can just see right there that there has been a shift within America. And that shift makes especially those who are in the older generations just a little bit uncomfortable. But the reality is it's the norm for those who are younger. So when people ask me how old I am and what generation, if I'm honest, I'll say I'm a baby boomer. But I've tried to slip into saying I'm an older millennial, but they don't believe it for some reason. But the reason is because that's what feels normal and natural and right. But we still are struggling with what is it that makes America so difficult, because some of the younger generation are beginning to ask the question, I wasn't around during slavery. I've never been around during Jim Crow. why is it my problem? Why do I have to deal with all of this racial tension when I wasn't a part of it? And here's the reason why. We already said change is difficult. Change takes time. Change is something that all of us have to endure, whether we like it or not. And the foundation was built on slavery, over 246 years of slavery, then another 89 years of segregation. So we've just been in this new era where being woke, being conscious, being inclusive has really been a thing. Gender discrimination is just now coming down. Embracing of LGBTQ community is just now being accepted. And all of those things are fighting against an entire history that goes in the other way. So what is it that we need to talk about today to make a difference? This is what my goal is today. We need to look at all the buckets of race, ethnicity, and culture. Now, how many of you all on here really want to go through each one of these individually? Just thumbs up if you do. I didn't think you did. It's a Saturday afternoon and you all are like, let's get through this keynote so I can get back to what I really want to do. See, I'm reading your minds. But the key is this. All of these buckets are the buckets that we have to deal with if we're going to truly be an inclusive organization, company, or as I work with so many congregations. The question is, are we going to actually have honest conversations? But let me also tell you another thing that I've realized that's a reality. These conversations are not easy. Some of these conversations are not comfortable. And some of these conversations bring on feelings of guilt and people don't even know where it comes from. So they shut down and they don't want to participate. One of my greatest joys is, like I said, being able to work with men and women who are in different companies. And this one particular company I was working with, I asked the question, what is, implicit bias? And it's the first hand I went up. Implicit bias is not in this room, in this company. I'm the founder. I've never let it happen. And I asked a simple question that got me fired. I said, so on your board, why aren't there any women? It was that quiet, because many times these buckets of culture, race, and ethnicity, they are blind spots for us. Notice I didn't say for them or for any group of people, for all of us. There are times when all of us have blind spots to any one of these buckets of culture. And the challenge for us is to walk in a way, to talk in a way, and to be the people who actually then deal with this with integrity. So we're getting ready to go into breakout room. And there are going to be 3 questions that you're going to be asking and talking about. Number 1, what bucket of race, ethnicity, and culture is the easiest to talk about? Number 2, what bucket of race, ethnicity, and culture is the hardest to talk about? And 3, what bucket is the biggest barrier to diversity, inclusion, and equity, especially in the organization where you are? This is going to be an 8-minute conversation, so you all won't have a whole lot of time, but this is your breakout time, 8 minutes. As you're coming back in, if you would just take a second and type in what is the easiest bucket of culture, ethnicity, and race to talk about. Just type it into the chat room. Gabrielle says the existence of racism. White privilege and microaggressions. Madeline says, generally talking about our own cultural background. Your group dictates the conversation. Dennis was sharing with us. If I had to choose implicit biases, it's interesting you all are choosing these as the easiest to talk to about. As I work as I'm coaching folk, especially in corporate America, those are the exact hardest ones to talk about. So now, which are the hardest ones that you all say are to talk about? Intersectionality, absolutely. Thank you, Isaiah. That's the only one that's difficult. Implicit bias, yes, is difficult. Based on your own perspective, everything is based on your own perspective, but speaking about it, always accepted based on generations. Racism and hate speech. What does it mean to be a diverse community? White privilege is hard to talk about because some people don't believe it's real. Both microaggressions and white privilege is difficult to talk about. Reckoning with your own implicit biases. I want to say thank you to everybody. You all have opened up the doors. Let me just give, I said I wasn't going to do a lot of teaching on this, but I will do this. The one thing that has helped the most is when there are intentional listening groups to hear other people's backgrounds, hear their experiences, and experience what they've gone through. This is also one of the most uncomfortable things to do, to sit in a room with a group of and I do a lot with gender biases as well as race bias, but to sit in a room with a group of women who say they've gone through having someone sexually abuse them at work, or for them to have had some type of bad experience. That's difficult to sit and listen to, because then you begin to ask the question, especially as a coach, is there anybody who's caring for you in the midst of this pain? It's difficult to hear about especially when we're talking about intersectionality, because when we talk about intersectionality, it can mean so many things to so many different. White privilege is a definite generation difference where many of our young people are willing to talk about it. But some of my older people I get to coach and work with say, I was never a part of it. I've never had that privilege, without understanding that, like me and my friend walked into Nordstrom's and had the security guard following us around the whole time. And when we finally turned and confronted, they said, because you look suspicious. The anger that was inside is something that I may not have released at that moment, but it builds up time after time after time. And all of us have those experiences where if we don't engage and have those sharing, we blow up. And we don't understand why this one individual is so angry or so hurt or so despondent, because we don't see the buildup over time. We only see the one incident. So as I said, I wasn't going to teach a lot about that, but I want to now share with you the one big idea. First, are there any questions that you want to ask me? This is the great time. We got 2 minutes for questions. If you want to chat, if you want to type it in.
Do you have a bucket that you think is like the hardest or the easiest to talk about?
Yes, the hardest for me personally, as a Black man sitting in a room, is what I'm talking about: implicit biases. Microaggressions is a close second. The easiest for me to talk about is cultural appropriation, because I see it everywhere, where we see the majority culture having appropriate someone else's. I'm a part of the people who've been writing letters to the Cleveland Indians and to the Redskins and to all these organizations that have Native American titles that I believe that they've appropriated the culture and not honored the people for who they are. So those are the two easiest to talk about. Thank you for that question. Any other questions? And if you just want to open your mic and ask it, that may be better. Oh, I see Tanya asked a question. How do you navigate the training spaces even when you don't agree with what's being said? As a trainer, my job is to help bring awareness. I'm not the one who brings the change. The key is once we have brought awareness, there has to be a group conversation with the people who are there. And every organization has a culture and it's shaped by everybody who's a part of that culture. And when the one person is just an outlier, he or she is not confronted by me, they're confronted by the group. I work hard to be in that in-between space, to be the one who brings the information, to share the information, to bring it to the table. But I'm not the one who changes an organization around diversity, equity, and inclusion. My job is to bring the information in and educate. Does that help you, Tanya?
Yes, and my name is Tanaya.
Tanaya, I'm sorry, thank you. We're going to continue on, and if there are no other questions, here's the big idea that can change the world. We have put this into a concept called inclusion, equity, diversity, access, and belonging. And the goal of those who are on my team, what we were trying to do is make it easy to look at the big buckets that then can change an organization, because that's who we normally work with. How do we help organizations come to a place where they're willing to change? So we're going to look at these 5 buckets, and we're going to do this in, I'm supposed to take 2 minutes for each. So let's see if I can stay on time. Some of y'all looking at me like, yeah, right. But we're going to try. So inclusion is actually bringing people to the table. We want to have a space where everybody can come. It must be intentional. It must be in every facet of what we're doing. Organizational inclusion includes identification, removal of barriers. So when we understand that inclusion is bringing everybody to the table, we then have to look at the challenges that it is. And that's what we have next. We're going to look at these 2. Inclusion, it must be intentional. If it's not intentional, it'll never take place. If you're not trying to intentionally bring everybody to the table, it won't take place. Identify and eliminate barriers. The reason why this is hard is because often there are unspoken rules of the organization. There are many times unspoken hierarchies. There are power structures that are not a part of the official rules. So as the organization is trying to be inclusive, there are barriers that are naturally built up. And then inclusion without equity is oppressive. Have you ever seen the organization that says, everybody's welcome, but as long as you stay in your place? Everybody's welcome as long as you don't speak out of turn. But the key to building inclusion is having authentic relationships, and that starts with listening. We call listening circles, where there are courageous conversations, where we begin listening to people who we want to reach. And when we're trying to reach new people for our organization or impact people, listening to them about their stories is a part of what we do. The next big piece of the big idea is diversity. This is when we want everybody at the table to have their own individual differences valued, not just because they're different, whether it's ethnicity, class, race, gender, sexual orientation. What we want is for them to be valued to be at the table, because you can be at the table and still be considered not really a part of us. And this is where the diversity part, we want to value the diversity of people. And here are the 2 challenges that come from that. Diversity does not always mean inclusion. I just shared that with you. And number 2, diversity without inclusion looks like tokenism. We brought you here because you're different, but we don't really want you to participate. We brought you to be a part of this group because you are different from those who are already at the table, but you're not really valued for your place, your intellect, your who you are as a person. And that feels oppressive when that happens. Diversity is about, when diversity is only about the numbers, you diminish and dilute your own mission. I want you all to hear that. If you just want diversity for the numbers, to be able to say so many people are a part of our group who are different than we are, it dilutes your mission, no matter who you are, whether it's corporate, school, or academic, or just anywhere, because our mission is always supposed to be the driving engine. And we bring people into the mission. We don't bring people in to make us look good. We bring people in to help us fulfill the mission. And so that's why that doesn't work.
William, can I jump in a minute?
Of course.
Several years ago when I was in Iowa, I ran a homeless runaway program for youth. And I had a Hispanic outreach program because we were in a meatpacking area. And my worker, she was about 3 or 4 years out of high school, but very, very good person. And she'd come to me periodically and say, this board wants me to be on their board, and I don't really want to. And I'd look right at her and I said, are you being asked because of you're Hispanic or because you are a very intelligent young lady? And she looked at me and says, thank you, you gave me my answer. And that was a very strong point you just made about that. And I pass it on to everybody else because unfortunately that's still alive and well today.
I appreciate you. Can I next time take that and put that as a part of my next workshop?
You got it. I'm not copywritten. I'm good.
Thank you so much, though. As we go to the next, equity. Equity is a concept that even when you bring people onto the board, their power is equal to everybody else on the board or in the organization. I was a member of the Rotary Club in Catonsville, Maryland, for a long time. And what I remember is when I first got to the Rotary Club, it was great to be a part of the club. I just participated in the weekly meetings and the outreach that we did. But joining the board was a different experience for me, because when I joined the board, there was this sense of, you haven't been here as long as the rest of us, so just wait before you make suggestions. They weren't willing to give up that power so that we were all on the same page. But as we went along and I shared and we got to know each other, they gave me that. The goal is, though, to eliminate those political challenges from the beginning. So when you bring people on, they immediately have the same access to everything that everybody else does. Did I say that's easy? No. Because even as I've served in organizations, I had the privilege of serving in Boys and Girls Club. And I remember those times when our activities director, we had teams of activities, and there were times when new people were coming in, and even as youth, it was hard for them to say, you're new and you can help us make the decisions about the activities for today. So it's something we all work on a daily basis. And so here are the challenges with equity. Distribution is different than acknowledging that we are. It's supposed to be distribution of power is different than acknowledging that that we all have resources. I apologize for that. Because the key is, just because we say it's out there in the resources doesn't mean that everybody has access to that. Equity for oppressed groups feels like justice, and equity for the majority group feels like oppression. So let me just see if I can make it clear. When we have an organization and we level the playing field, those who've been in power give up some of their power so that those who came in without are equal. Those who were previously oppressed feel like, wow, this is justice, and I feel good about it because now I'm at the table for real. And yet there are those who were in power, when they brought equal, they feel like they took that away from me. This is something I deal with a lot with, especially the small businesses and growing businesses, because people feel like you took power away from me in order for someone else to come and be a part of us. And my biggest, I should say, the thing that I keep sharing, if we all have equal worth in each other's eyes, then there is no such thing as someone took something from me, but I shared so that we can walk together. And that is something that equity brings to the table. So I think we've done ideas, diversity, equity, and next, access. Having access to all areas is something that is challenging, because if you look at the last word here, it says well-being. Mental well-being, economic well-being, social cultural well-being, all of those are the challenges that we're faced with right now. And the reality is, we have seen it within our distribution of the vaccines. There's not equal access. But what are you willing to do? What am I willing to do to help those who are underserved to actually get the vaccine that they need? This has been a big, big challenge for all of us. My big thing, and the thing that I joined my family, is I don't believe there's one person in America who should go to bed hungry. And so many times I frustrate folk who I'm out with, because I'll see a hungry person, or at least somebody asking, I'll say, let's go with us to and eat. I bring them, I get them a meal, because I truly believe no person should go to bed in America hungry. But that also means that when I give them that, I want to say, how will you get your next meal? I'm willing to help you with one, but now how do you get your next one? And that has been the biggest challenge, because sometimes they don't want to enter into the place in the space where they can have greater access. But that's what we're talking about when we look at access. And due to time, I'm just going to skip on to belonging. Thank you, Courtney. Belonging is saying that not only are you at the table, we have a diverse table, everybody's equal at the table, there's access to all the resources that are necessary, but we also want you to know that you belong. And this is the part of compassion. The first force set, the idea was all about leadership, but belonging is about compassion. How do you get to know someone well enough that they're part of your organization, that they really believe that they belong? This is something that I enjoy having conversations about, because it takes us past what is the legal stuff, what is the legislative stuff, but it then begins to say, how do I build authentic relationships in such a way that I am truly a part of the organization? And that requires our hearts to be in a place that are changed. Previously, I was going to break us out into table talks, but if we can go to that next slide.
If you run a little bit over, by the way, it's completely okay.
I was told to stay on time, and you didn't know my dad. My dad was like, well, anyway, long story, being on time is important in my family. Although I'm not always on time. Go back one, please, Courtney. Yeah, that's the one. So how does the big idea impact the school where you're at? What is your role as a leader to develop an environment where the big idea can thrive? And where will you start to implement the big idea? These are the three questions I'm going to ask that you discuss in this particular table talk. It will once again be 8 minutes. And the goal is that we come back and you will report out about what your group said. Thank you. As we're all coming back, I'm going to ask that you just open your microphones and just begin answering those questions. What's the big idea that can impact the school where you currently attend?
Equity.
Equity.
Access.
Access.
Definitely diversity and inclusion at my school.
Okay. What is your role as a leader to develop the environment so that the big idea can thrive? You all are quiet because it's a Saturday afternoon and y'all are tired. But I'm going to still challenge you. What is your role as a leader? You all are all leaders. So what is your role?
I think as a leader, in order to let this big idea thrive, we have to be accepting of everyone who comes to us and who we serve.
You got to accept everybody. Thank you very much, Connor.
We have to be
Because-
brave enough to push outside of our own comfort zones.
Pushing outside your comfort zones. How do you get comfortable pushing outside your comfort zones?
You go ahead and do it, and you know, be willing to fail and be okay with failing and be okay with learning from that failure.
You gave all the points. So to get past your own comfort zones, first thing you do is push by it. You do it regardless. And then you step back to have a time of reflection. But you have to be okay with all that comes to you. Some people are going to like it, some are not. What you don't want to do is then retreat from your position as if you were wrong. You want to stand your ground and learn from that and then take another step forward. Okay? It's always better to do it step by step than throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You want to move and help people go through a process, not offend people from the very beginning. What else is the role of a leader?
Set the example.
You've got to set the example. If you're not living a lifestyle that embraces all people, how can you expect those who follow you to do that? You have to be the first one out there saying, I'm modeling what I believe in. You know, I know this is going to make some of you all kind of laugh, but for the last 10 years, I've been losing the same 50 pounds. And then yet coaching people about how to lose weight. And then this year's the first time. So I've lost almost 20 pounds since January 1st. And I feel so much better because all of a sudden now I'm modeling this as I'm telling other people that they need to be healthy. So those are some of the things we got to model it up front. One other thing that's responsibility to the leader, then we're going to move on to the third question.
Communication, like intentionally communicating what your goals are and following through.
Intentionally have a plan, work your plan, and communicate your plan. All of these are important, especially because all of the elements are so intricate and they're so sensitive. If you don't communicate what your upfront intention is, it can be misunderstood, and recovering from that is very difficult. So thank you all for participating in that question. And finally, where would you start to implement the big idea? If I asked you today to leave this meeting and get started implementing one portion of the big idea, where is it that you will start?
William, if I can jump in, I think we're ahead of the game on that because there's several young people on this Zoom call. On June 6th, the Capital District Board, the CKI Board, and the Key Club Board came together with a joint statement on the issues that were affecting our country on June 6th. And it's available on our Capital District website, and I encourage you to look at it. And like I said, several people on this call, we jumped the gun back then to make diversity, equity, and inclusion part of the Capital District at all three levels.
All I can say is then I have a big smile on my face because you all are ahead of the game, and yet you still have a job to do as leaders to help others come to the table.
Very much.
So applause from one. So let me go ahead and get ready to close out. If we can go to the next and final slide. Here are our roles as educators that we need to take. Now we need to educate ourselves and educate others to what diversity, inclusion, and equity is all about. And like we said, we put it into the concept of idea plus B. Inclusion, diversity, equity, access, plus belonging. When we put those together, we deal with so many of those buckets at the same time. It makes it easier to have the conversation for organizational change. 2, we got to listen to everybody. Everybody's voice at the table is just as important as your voice. And sometimes those voices may not be at the same place where you are, but they're just as important. And we need to hear those if you want to change. Then you need to share. I always tell people that leaders are initiators. Leaders have a vision of where they want to go, where they want to lead, and whether it's individually or collectively, they share that vision so that the whole organization can move forward. And you must take action. I have seen so many organizations with beautiful plans about equity and diversity that never take action. My encouragement to you is that you take action. And this is where you become the organization that can change the world. If you remember at the beginning, I said this organization can have the one big idea that can change the world. You now know that big idea. You now know the action steps to make it take hold and be powerful. And so as I close on this last slide, it says, I'm just going to tell you this. You have greatness within you. When you discover the greatness that's in you, the gifts and talents that you have, and engage that greatness, you begin to move into a realm that very few people get to experience in life. Because then we focus on getting results from those gifts that are already naturally in you. We all have natural patterns of behavior and talents and gifts. And the question, are we going to use it to change the world, or are we going to use it to make ourselves feel good? My hope is that you use it to help change the world. Because when you realize the greatness that is in you, you also give yourself the opportunity to live your best life, to experience all the potential that you have, to experience all the gifts that you have, to build relationships that are authentic, to work with people around you in a way that has harmony, peace, and yet impact. And this is what is necessary in order to change the world. And so I want to thank you once again, Matthew, especially, and all of the leaders. I just say thank you extremely, a whole lot for inviting me. My name is Reverend William Chaney, and I do this for a living. I coach professionally, but my goal to be with you is just to help you be the best leaders that you can possibly be. I hope that you have a great day. And once again, thank you so much.